For our new friends, we normally would start with a prayer, and we do a good job of that, I think. But I thought it might be interesting to hear from Father Jim Martin, who is, you might recognize his face from his various blogs and social media posts. He's a very prolific writer on the Catholic faith. And he has just a 2-minute reflection on what Lent means. And this is something I think will set the tone for our conversation today and give us something to think about as our day winds down. And we've had full days with lots of school children, and it's a good time just to reflect on things. So here's Father Jim. Hopefully. Here we go.
I'm Father Jim Martin. I'm author of My Life with the Saints, and I'm here today to talk about alms and joy. It may seem a strange topic. Giving alms is part of a Lenten tradition. Now, most people think about Lent as something, a time to give up things, to abstain from things. But, people fast from different foods. They might give up chocolate. They might give up soda, something like that. But, originally, those fasts were not only to help us detach ourselves from material needs and remind ourselves that we're not just material beings, solely, but also to save money. So the fasting, if you didn't eat meat, you would fast and save the money and give the money to the poor, right? But I think we've sort of lost that idea, and Lent has become just about giving things up. So I think almsgiving can be a really nice way of recovering that tradition of generosity. Now that really leads to joy. Why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. When you give away something, you're going to be freer, and so you're going to be more joyful. You're going to have more freedom in your life. Secondly, when you give something away, you are following what Christ has taught us. You're following what theologians call praxis, the actual practice, putting into effect Christian teachings, which brings us joy, brings us closer to Christ's desire for us to live the good life and to help others live the good life. And third, we give to people and we make them joyful. So we make the whole community, the body of Christ, of which we are a member, more joyful. So I think this Lent, it's good to think about not only giving up chocolate, right, but actually being generous to people and giving alms. And in that almsgiving, we can experience some joy during Lent. So with my prayers for a lovely Lent, I'm Father Jim Martin, author of My Life with the Saints. Thanks a lot.
I like how he helps us think about Lent in a different way. And I was saying to the East Coast group that this is how I was taught about Lent as a kid in Catholic school, that Lent is about not just giving things up for the challenge of it, but to kind of grow as a person, do what you can to grow as a person. I had wonderful nuns, and Father John, who's still at the school, and my father recently went to a men's prayer group. My father was astonished that Father John was still there. He's almost 90 and still instructing in a very vigorous and thoughtful way. He would put the ashes from Ash Wednesday on our hands so that we would see them and think about it all day instead of looking at other people's foreheads. And that was really good. We had to think about it all day. Look at this thing and think what meant ashes to ashes meant. There was a hygiene issue as the little kids didn't want to wash their hands all day. But it was a way to think about Lent in a different way. And so thinking about our faith today is our objective. And it's an interesting question that we don't always get time to do. I'm going to pause for just a minute if anyone would like to jump in and share their thoughts. And if not, that's okay too. Okay.
So, sorry, I was just going to say, Mary Bridget, makes me think of, we try and do the compare and contrast kind of thing, like fast from calling names, feast on asking people to join your game at recess, fast from swearing, feast on praying. We try to give the kids some different areas of their life that they could try to improve over Lent. And we use that kind of terminology with it.
I think that I think that's an interesting contrast, and it's very concrete, especially for the younger elementary school students, that it's not just about giving something up for the sake of giving up, but to grow and to focus on something else that makes us a better person. I like that very much. So our agenda today builds off of what Kristen shared at the end of January, that we're going to review this idea of Catholic identity. We're going to talk about cultivating a Catholic community. And this is something I think is very important, that it's not enough just to plug in, plug out, or check in, check out once a week at Mass, but we have to be part of something. It takes work, it takes effort. We have to make sure, check in with ourselves every once in a while, that we are participating actively and that we're serving as models, as Kristen encouraged us to do, for our students and for our school communities. As we prepare for Lent and Ash Wednesday, are we taking the time to think about what this means for our lives generally, or for our spiritual lives, our inner lives, who we are as people outside of our busyness of everyday life? And then we have some housekeeping items. So this is my crosswall. I taught in Texas for 5 years. I was at a parochial school for part of that time. And coming from the Great Lakes region, I never saw a wall of crosses. I noticed Donna has a beautiful cross and a picture of the Lord right over your shoulder. I'm used to just one at a time like that. But my students, and you can see it over my shoulder, they would give me these as Christmas gifts. And one of these, if you can see my mouse right here, that's from a student who's starting college this fall. She gave it to me when she was in 3rd grade. And she wants to be a police officer. So she has really come a long way. And to display them, when I got accepted the position here at the Roche Center, I wanted to display my kids' crosses as I think of them. And so it's wonderful to display them. Are there ways in your schools that you display your faith, display what it means to be Catholic or to be in this Catholic community, that are different maybe than the everyday?
We have a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the main hallway. And this was something that our custodian had talked about, that she really thought that that was an important symbol for our families. And so it's very central. It's right outside my office. And I find that the parents, whenever they're coming, like for parent-teacher conferences, they'll take the little kids and they'll show them Our Lady. And if they're dressed up for the performances, like the music concerts, they'll take a picture of the children that are dressed up near Our Lady. And I just see the parents really, that's a key piece for the parents when they walk through our schools, to know that Our Lady is watching over all of us.
I love that. It's both faith oriented, but also culturally oriented as well, right?
Right.
This is part of their home and their home culture here at the school. I think that's great.
Hi, this is Mariela.
Yes, please, Mariela.
Yes, at St. Leo's, they have a chapel that's open, obviously, not only to students, teachers, and staff, but parents are also welcome to come in during the school day. And so there's the chapel's a little hard to find, but there's a little guide that kind of says Chapel This Way for everyone. And so that's been a nice way to build community.
I think that's great. And it makes it feel like home, that it's for them as well. It's not only for students or only for teachers, it's for the whole community.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Thank you. Okay, so this is a time to think about what being Catholic can mean for the person, for the individual. And so when Liz was sharing that story about the statue of Our Lady, it reminds me of what I wanted to share here. I wish I could take credit for this photo. I can't. I wish I could, though. My father's family is from an island off of Ireland. And so this is the island that my family is from. And when I think about being Catholic, while both my parents are Catholic and both their cultures are very Catholic, this is what I think of. This island where the churches that my ancestors went to and built with the stones that they dragged from the beach up the hill, they've been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's an old connection. It's a very alive connection, but it's very much an old connection. It's part of who I am as a person and in my heritage, but also part of my present. And I also think it's important to think about places or aspects of our lives that are not connected to our work or daily living. You know, the Japanese have that saying of forest bathing. I don't know if any of you participate in that. You take the time to go out into nature and to relax in nature. It's very important. And so that can also be part of our experience, is to step away from our daily lives and to be actively involved in faith communities. Would anyone like to reflect on what that can mean for their students or for yourselves? Would our friends from Omaha like to share anything in terms of maybe a special chapel or special experience that your students might have related to their faith?
I'm trying to think of a special thing that's students related to our faith, and nothing's coming up right now. I do find it interesting, all the different imagery of the faith symbols that we have around the school, being Croatian church originally, and then now obviously being predominantly Latino. And just in my office, a lot of the imagery that I have is from Central and South America, which doesn't represent the Mexican student body from North America that is their predominant force. So just the different symbols that I find it interesting that there's a very mixed, a lot of different representations of faith. That Catholicity of being universal is definitely present, even though we're predominantly Latino at St. Peter and Paul.
That is a very insightful comment, Andrea, and I'm really glad that you shared it, because I think the experience for many of our schools, particularly on the East Coast and the Upper Midwest, that is the experience, that these are parishes that might have been settled by Italians or Slovenians or Irish or Germans or what have you, or Croatians. But in the century since, or even half century since that parish was founded or that school was opened, it's a new community. And being cognizant of the symbols is so important so that folks feel welcome. And I think that's what your custodian was saying, Liz, that this is something that's going to speak to the parents on many levels, that this is for them, this school, they're welcome here, and this is part of who they are. And so the fact that you've got all those symbols is really interesting and important. And I look forward to learning more about what the journey has been for Saints Peter and Paul. The neighborhood has probably changed as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, the neighborhood in the parish as well is it's definitely the European descendant community is aging, and there's still some in the neighborhood that are of European descent that are younger, but the vast majority are aging in the parish. And then in the surrounding areas, it's predominantly Latino that's kind of taking over and continually moving into the neighborhood. So it is still a mix, but the percentages are increasingly Latino, with the Anglo portion aging out or moving to the west.
And I think it's a story that has been replicated in many places. In last year's Academy, a film was shown called Adelante about a parish in Pennsylvania in the Philadelphia area that had been settled by Irish. And there were still some aging Irish Americans there, but a younger, larger number of Mexican and Mexican-American families had moved into the parish. And the priest, the documentary is about how this priest was able to bring people together, knit their traditions together, show what was universal and Catholic, like the true definition of the word Catholic, and to bring folks together. That it's a challenge, but a great opportunity to welcome and to enact the hospitality that we are called to show to all of our neighbors. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So the questions and thoughts that Kristen challenged us with at the end of January are here, and I thought we should look at them again. How do we strengthen our Catholic identity when things are changing or the world is far more secular? Things, the the expectations are different. How do we strengthen our own Catholic experience when our students may not be from a Catholic background, or our expectations have changed of the people I grew up with, relatives and friends. I'm the only one who baptized her kids, and that's okay. That was my choice, and they have their choices. But when we were growing up, everybody was baptized. It's just the things have changed. So what do we do with that? There are no right or wrong answers here. It's something we're all kind of reflecting on. And how do we model a Catholic identity for students? Any thoughts about these big questions?
Well, I know one of the things that we as administrative staff have been wrestling with is that we do have a canonical administrator assigned to our school, but we are not a typical parish school. We're more a community school. So we have 5 founding parishes. And even with our canonical administrator, he's got many other duties in the archdiocese that he's working on. So we've been talking about how can we have a priestly presence more often in our school, and how can we work with the 5 pastors to kind of to understand what they're doing in their parishes, and what we're teaching in our classes, and how do they overlap, and how can we strengthen each other's programs. So for Catholic Schools Week, we invited the 5 pastors in, and the kids wrote letters thanking them for being our spiritual leaders. And then we passed those out to the pastors. And we're continuing a dialogue of how can we work with the churches, so it's more coherent, I guess, is what we're trying to find a way to do.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, similar to Andrew's, that the new dynamic is that you could have 5 parishes come together to form one school, but the 5 parishes still may have their own expectations for Catholic formation, for what the children should be learning when, making sure you follow the liturgical calendar. There's a logistical aspect to that that's probably, you probably could go into the diplomatic service if you wanted to at this point, Liz, that you have been negotiating so many different groups and expectations that's challenging. So there's a practical aspect to it, but then there's also a spiritual aspect to it, that at the end of the day, you're trying to raise Catholic Christians. And what does that mean? I think the letter writing activity sounds great. They wrote in English or Spanish?
It depended on which classroom they were writing out of.
Okay.
So the Spanish classes wrote in Spanish. 3 of our priests who do Mass with us are bilingual, so they could receive it in either language.
Okay, very good. Other thoughts?
One thing, we're also not a parish school here in Milwaukee either. We did some of the similar things. We wrote thank you notes to our priests during Catholic Schools Week as well. But one thing, we are affiliated with the School Sisters of Notre Dame. They're our sponsoring order, so we do try to keep a close relationship with them. We have a Founders Day Mass where we celebrate our school sisters. We have 3 who are still on staff with us. We try to kind of educate our kids about their order and the service they do. So we try to keep that close relationship with our sponsoring order as part of us strengthening our Catholic identity for our kids.
I like that you've included the sisters because their role's a little bit different, and it's important to make sure that all the spiritual leaders are included. In the previous hour, we had a sister of that same order who's serving in Phoenix, so she would be thrilled to hear that was included. And I think this idea of being kind of an independent Catholic school is challenging. I went to an independent Catholic school, and I think altogether we must have had 10 different parishes that people were coming from. And it did make things a little complicated. And I was just a kid, so I can only imagine what Father John went through to make sure that things were comfortable for everybody involved. It's complicated. Other thoughts? How do we strengthen this Catholic identity in a very secular world?
So
Okay. So Kristen asks us that when we pray, to make our prayers original if we can, if we're comfortable doing so, and to really put ourselves into the prayer. There's a comfort in just repeating the prayers and the things that are familiar, but it's a challenge intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, to really put ourselves into the prayer. I find it hard. I am not called to spirituality to the same level as Kristen. Those of us who know Kristen know she's a very spiritual person. She has a master's in divinity. But for me, I need a crutch. And I find that the examen from the Jesuits is very, very helpful. These 5 steps, 15 to 20 minutes a day, that pushes me to think about things differently, to really remove myself from the things that occupy my mind and to think about bigger questions. I was receiving this by email for a while from a Jesuit group out of Ireland that was hard every day to be told, okay, let's think about this today. Let's try to be grateful for that today. That's a challenge, and it's a good challenge. It's a hard challenge. It's easy to forget to be grateful for things that matter. So I find this to be a very useful tool. Are there other tools that you would recommend to your colleagues here for thinking about prayer and thinking about growing as spiritual people?
One of the things that we were working on this year, our theme is that we are a community of believers, comunidad de creyentes. And so each grade level has looked at a saint, and the children, once a week, a different saint is chosen. And the children from that grade level lead us either in prayer or they talk a little bit about the saint and what the saint was known for. And we try to highlight more of the Spanish-speaking saints. So we've done Saint Rose of Lima lately. Mm-hmm. And also there are saints outside of our doors that are multicultural. And so we had the students find out about their saint for their classroom. And I've learned things from the kids when they're praying or telling us about their saints that I never knew. So I always thought that was a good thing to do. And we're getting to know more about the saints.
And the cultures that they come from.
Right.
It connects you directly to the families, which is so, so important for buy-in. That if the bilingual schools are to be successful, there have to be ways to bridge the two communities, the English-speaking community and the other languages. In our case, it's often Spanish-speaking. And of course, there are many Spanishes that these children might be coming from. As Andrew mentioned, South America, Central America, Mexico, different traditions, the Caribbean in some of our schools. And it's important to find ways to connect with the families in meaningful manners. Very good. So, Kristen and Father Rani O'Dwyer recently wrote on the NCEA's Catholic School Education blog about some of these issues. And she mentioned it in the previous webinar, but I wanted to provide you with the link here so you can read it later if you so choose. But they talk about some pretty challenging things. How do we raise children in a world that's calling for their attention in so many different ways? So many different devices, smartphones, so many different access to things, to information that they may not be ready for, or information that we as their parents and teachers may not be wanting them to have just yet. How do we find a way for them to grow as individuals in a personal, spiritual way that will help them to be better people? And so in their letter to parents of young children, they're talking directly to the parents in a very meaningful way. I think it's a really good document for reflection during a professional development session with your teachers. It's good to think of as school leaders, are we modeling this behavior? Kristen and Ronnie have rooted this in the 2007 document, as you can see here, the Vatican document from the Congregation for Catholic Education, that it's based in this document, but now 11 years later, how do we keep this relevant? How do we make sure this matters to who our students are now? And it's a very useful letter. Refining these connections with families was Kristen's challenge to us, and understanding how we can knit together the classroom and school communities with the neighborhood and family communities, so that it does feel like a meaningful experience. Because this is not just a bilingual school, this is a Catholic bilingual school, and what does that mean for our families, for the students who are enrolled in our schools? And so reaching out to their cultures through the saints, reaching out through letter writing, is a very meaningful exercise. Other thoughts or ideas?
I just remember that as a staff, we are doing a series called Going Deeper. And I know the gentleman's name is Jonathan, I think it's Doyle. He's from Australia. And this was a gift that the Catholic School Center of Excellence here in Minnesota gave a subscription for these videos. And they talk about the Catholic faith and Catholic doctrine, but often in very unique ways and very modern ways. And then there's time that you can reflect about the message and talk about it as a staff, and the prayer that we end with. And so we've been just, instead of me coming up with an opening prayer for faculty meetings, we've been using this Going Deeper series. And it's provided some interesting conversations, I have to say. So that would be one resource that I hadn't heard of before.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I think I have heard of that one. I used something similar as a teacher when I was teaching at the parochial school in Texas, but it wasn't Going Deeper, but it was similar to that. It was referenced, the Going Deeper was referenced. Other thoughts on that?
I've met Ronnie O'Dwyer. He taught at my alma mater at DeSmet for a while, and so very charismatic guy. I'm looking forward to reading the letter that Kristen and him wrote. But one of the things I think that is a testament is that I hear from parents is the more that we get it right in school, the more that parents, it's going to bleed into parents at home. And you hear that, like I've had parents say, like, oh, my daughter's the one who said, no, we need to pray before we eat at the dinner table. And that is a testament to teachers doing it right at school. And so I think that that's important to remember too. But sometimes that's the best way to reach out to parents is when their children are actually saying, no, they're like, this is the way we need to do it. And I think that has an impact on them. That some parents have even commented, oh, I need to get back more involved in the church, or I need to dig deeper in my faith life, or go deeper, like Liz was saying. So I think that that's something that can't be forgotten too.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And it's, it can be jarring when the child, I've had that with my own children, go, Mama, why are you doing that? Like, oh, right, I should slow down. You are right. And it's, it can be quite the awakening. And then that gives us an opportunity to open our doors spiritually, metaphorically, and literally to parents in ways that maybe they wouldn't have done otherwise. They wouldn't have taken the initiative. Mariela, if you're still with us, I think you are. This idea of welcoming the parents into the chapel. That's not just the child's space at school, but here the child can welcome mom and dad into the place where they are growing spiritually.
Yes, I think that was part of it. It would be a sense of community building to get the parents not only to come to the school, other than dropping their child off or picking them up, but actually seeing it as a space for spiritual renewal.
Exactly. The Catholic Schools Education blog is full of good resources like this. I'm sure many of you use it already, but the podcast is something that Kristen and our executive director, Patty Weitzel O'Neill, have spoken on, or have been featured on, and there's a lot of good resources. So we recommend, checking it out every once in a while. It might be good for your teachers or just for you as a school leader.
Hey, y'all, I'm going to sign off now. This is Mariela.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it very much.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. See you next time.
Adios.
Bye.
Okay. So when we think about our stories and things that we share with the families, this comes from the letter to young parents, or to parents of young children, by Ronnie and Kristen. I'm going to read it for you, and I think it will resonate with you in particular, Liz, I think. So a Catholic school models its community on the teachings of Jesus, not in vague philosophical ways, but in very real terms. Last Thanksgiving, the custodian of a Catholic elementary school in Boston was paged to the school auditorium. Putting aside his dust broom, he made his way across the building to find the entire school assembled and anticipating his arrival. They stood and cheered as the principal directed him to the front podium. He was presented with notes and cards of gratitude from every classroom. The community celebrated the man with the dirtiest, hardest job, and the students received a timeless lesson from God's Spirit. Honor the dignity of all persons. The moment was a lived-out parable, reminding us that the heart of community is connection to the least and to all. This is the unique thing about Catholic schools, about religious schools, that you can explore this in a very meaningful way. And I think this is very moving to share with the students. And Kristen gave us this idea of service with knowledge last time. It's not enough just to do a service project. It's not enough just to volunteer. It has to have some meaning. It has to have some bigger purpose. So she shared the anecdote that her son Thomas, who attends a Catholic school in the area, told his mother, well, we're going to do a service project for Catholic Schools Week. And he was excited. He was looking forward to it. And she was, okay, so what are you doing? And he told her, she's, okay, but why are you doing it? It was Catholic Schools Week. She was, okay, but why? So what? Because it's nice, but why? And trying to get him to push further, because that had not been discussed in the class. It's not enough just to be nice to somebody just because you can, but you think about this in a deeper way. She says, why can't the public school students just down the road do the same service project? Because they could, we're just doing it. But to think about what this means, to ask, as she says, ask your students to explain the importance of community service, to think about what this means in terms of being active Catholics, to be living out our faith in an active way. I'm sure you all were very busy during Catholic Schools Week and other weeks, frankly, but are there discussions that you've had with your teachers or your students about the meaning behind your busyness? It's a hard thing. It's hard to set aside the time to think about the reasons why we do what we do. Thoughts on this?
This happened kind of randomly, but in my weekly bulletin to the staff, I put in like, I literally just Google like Catholic poster inspirational and try to find something that comes up. But I think it's my secretary who's doing it, but she cuts out every one of them for the quarter and like pastes them and sticks them above the copier and on the cabinets in the copy room. And it's kind of become something that I do just to try to keep that going. But for me, it reminds me of all the different things, and it's kind of, it brings you back, you know, when you're at the copier and you're busy in a moment and it's, you're like just trying to get through that grind. It gives you a little bit of that inspiration. And so while it's kind of cliche, and I'm sure some of the posters I've chosen have just been last minute Sunday night and I need to get something out to my staff, it's her action has kind of made it a more meaningful practice, I think. So something that's kind of happened spontaneously, but has helped. So
I think that's fantastic. Here you've taken the initiative to provide this thoughtful piece, and then your teammate, your secretary, is making sure that this is reflected on ongoing, not just a split second on a Monday morning. I think that's fantastic. You should take a picture of that and send it to us, and we'll put it on our blog.
Okay, we only have 3 so far this month, but
that's more than I have.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. Because it goes back to the idea of the Jesuits, you know, the daily prayer, 15 minutes. Taking the time just to remove ourselves from the expectations of contemporary life, 24-hour news cycle, constant access to information, always busy, moving, doing different things. we have to be able to take care of ourselves emotionally too, and spiritually. And if we don't take the time to do that, or have colleagues to help us remember to do that, we won't do it. Many of us anyway won't do it. So I think that's a great professional tradition you have started at your school. I think that's great. Other thoughts? Okay. So I hope you can see this through, do like this. Okay. Kristen asks us to explore our faith and make time for our spiritual growth, which is what is happening in Omaha. And the scripture passage from Luke that she read last week about the feelings the followers of Jesus had when he appeared on the road and opened the scriptures to them, that this was very, very meaningful, and it made them think about things differently. Even though they had been living it, being reminded of it was very important. And to go through that journey, that faith can be very much a journey activity. A very dear friend of mine is starting her spiritual challenge tomorrow. It's called Walk to Emmaus. It's through her parish, and every day or every evening starting tomorrow, she's going to be spending several hours at the church, and she's got a sponsor to really grow as a member of her church and to think about what it means to be Catholic for her. And that's a challenge to do that every night for several nights in a row in preparation for Lent and for Ash Wednesday. And so we were asked to send her letters and mementos so every night she gets a few more encouraging words from a few more friends and relatives, because it's a journey. She's going through a journey activity. So are there moments when we are exploring our own faith? Do we make the time for this for ourselves? Do we make time for it at work? Even though we work at religious locations, are we making time for it? Do you have weekly mass? Do you have prayer before faculty meetings?
One of the things this year that I'm doing again, it's trying to make that intentional connection with our 5 founding parishes, is I am an elector at the parish that happens to host our school. And so they have been having difficulty finding community members to lector when the school mass is on a holy day, for instance, Ash Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have asked if I can be the lector for that time, which helps our liturgists out, but also to have that connection for the people in the community who see me only on the weekends as a member of their Catholic community.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the kids to see me lector instead of one of the kids lecturing, and to know that I am of both communities and that we are celebrating together. And that's been very meaningful for me this year. And I think I've heard from some of the parishioners too, who have come up to me afterwards and said, oh, it was so great to have you be the lector. I felt more connected to the kids because I know you, and now I was part of, with the kids. So it's been a really good experience, I think.
That is interesting, because you are sending the message, like you said, you're of both communities. And I imagine the kids say, well, we've got to go to church because Mrs. Ramsey's going to be reading. It might be exciting because you're like a celebrity, I'm sure, for like the first and second graders. Big stuff. My son's first grade teacher comes to his basketball games, and that's all he talks about the whole weekend, is that Mr. Jones showed up. So when we are teaching, we are serving in these leadership positions, you're a very important person in their lives, and just to model that as being an active member of the church is very important. I think that's a very important gesture that you've made there, Liz. And I think that's important to the adults as well, that you're walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk, you're going through it. You're participating actively. I think that's great. Matt, if I may, in Milwaukee, are your students coming from all over the city? Are you drawing from many different parishes?
No, I mean, from just kind of around where our school is for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And are the faculty from the same area, or are they coming in from the suburbs?
Faculty's coming from all over, so some from close by, some from out in some of the suburbs, so kind of a diversity there.
Mm-hmm. So a bit more spread out.
Yeah.
So that kind of activity of participating in the parish might be a bit more challenging.
Yes.
Yeah. One of our schools in California, there's an extraordinary commute, partly because the Los Angeles area is just difficult that way, but the principal is sharing that she's got some teachers who have a 1.5 to 3 hour commute depending on traffic. And so being part of the students' community can be very difficult. So trying to find ways to connect can be a challenge.
For sure.
So these are ongoing challenges. These are ongoing opportunities to grow in our faith experience and to model it for our colleagues and for the students. And maybe in turn, the students will model it for their parents, and they will want to, pray before a meal or go to church for our church service. When Ash Wednesday arrives just around the corner, hopefully the students will understand the deeper meaning of it and can explain that in more meaningful ways. We'll see, and also explain in multiple languages, because the twin schools are so blessed that way. Kristen encouraged us to encounter, to move forward to new experiences and new people in our lives. And the twin schools often bring together many different aspects of our communities: English speaking, non-English speaking, Catholic, in some cases non-Catholic. So it's a great opportunity to enact what Kristen has challenged us to do. Any thoughts on this before I move on? Okay. So some housekeeping. Some important information for you to know. You have probably received the Academy registration. So the Academy, I got a question about this just the other day, so I'm going to say it again. June 24th through 28th in Boston at the Babson Executive Conference Center. Be sure your school is registered. We're taking a head count. We are limited on our space, so make sure that you make clear that you will be there and that your team will be there, or whatever the combination of individuals. Okay. We were talking about the Walk to Emmaus. We also have the Emmaus cohort. So if you have not participated in Emmaus, which is our Catholic school leadership series here at the Roach Center, you're highly encouraged to check it out. It draws participants, as you see in the map, from all over the United States. It has been replicated elsewhere because it's such a successful program, and it really provides school leaders with development opportunities and professional opportunities that they would not get elsewhere. It's a very unique program, and we encourage you to apply, or to encourage your colleagues to apply. It's a really meaningful experience. Several of the twin network members, school leaders, have participated and have gotten a lot out of it. Any questions about the Academy or the Emmaus series? Okay. Yes.
One question just about the Emmaus series. Kristen kind of mentioned that there's some opportunity now to connect it to a 10 credit sort of thing that Boston College is doing. Could you talk about that a little bit, or would that be a different kind of conversation to have?
I can give you some broad information about it, but it would be a longer conversation. So I encourage you to give me or Kristen a call, and we can talk about what that would mean more specifically. But the website also has some information. Emmaus series.
I can check that out first and then just talk to you about it.
Yeah, but it's an important comment because Boston College is going to be connecting the Emmaus series now with course credit. So an opportunity to get, if you need CEUs or if you need to show that you've acquired so many postgraduate credits, this is a great way to do that, specifically geared for Catholic school leaders. I would look at the website to see what this would mean, and perhaps compare it to what you've already, perhaps if you have a master's degree, what this would mean in conjunction with what you've already done. And then to talk to Kristen specifically, because you may have things that are very similar, you may have things that are really different, and to talk about what those coursework would entail. But the emmausseries.org is a really good website for that. That's our website for the Emmaus series, and it is connected to course credit through the Lynch School of Education here at Boston College. Thank you for your question. Okay, so once you register for the Academy, provide us with some basic information, you will be given more information in terms of the invoice and then some specific details about traveling, and we'll gather some more information about who's coming, if they have food allergies, things we should know, so that we can make your stay comfortable and exciting and rejuvenating professionally and personally. This is a picture from last year's, and it was a really good experience, and we're looking forward to hosting all of you. We do have a book club again. So this is a book that has been used with the Twin Network previously. You may have a copy of it. The authors are here, Beeman and Euro. Teaching for Biliteracy. We are trying to find a book because, as Liz discovered, we can upend the book market if we're not careful. If we choose something that's apparently too unique. For our friends from Omaha, we selected a book this fall that apparently was out of print, but it was available on Amazon. But then we bought all the copies on Amazon, and poor Liz, when she went to buy her copy, within just a few days of me announcing it, how much was it on offer for at Amazon, Liz? Like $1,500?
Yeah, it was over 1,000.
Which is insane, because when I purchased my copy, it was like 10.
Yeah,
But, it was a
but I
great
have this book, so I have it in my office, in fact, so I'm good.
I was thinking about you, my friend. It was a great lesson in economics. So we won't do that again. We and Cal, the publisher, was not even amused at us for doing this. They'd even offer I mean, they gave us a PDF, but geez. Anyway, so this is going to be something that hopefully you have in your professional libraries, and if not, it is a really great resource. It's not terribly long, lots of practical information, and there are some who have used it previously. It's going to be a good refresher course. And if you have teachers who are new to the 2A immersion pedagogy or new to Twin, this is going to be really good for them to use, and it will be good for you to provide them with perhaps some sections like, what does biliteracy actually mean? So you'd be surprised how we sometimes just need to take a minute to refresh our minds on what these becomes too common use. So I will be sending some information about what we're reading when, and more information on this book, but we would like you to do that. We encourage you to check out Emmaus. Make sure you're registered for the Academy. And we are always available for questions or comments if you have any. In the chat box, and I'll try to, there is a link. I'm putting it there again. Please take a look at this link and provide me with some information. Let me know if this has been useful. Give me some feedback on the webinar. I'd appreciate it. And that way I know how to make this a better experience for you next time. Any last questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to let you go a few minutes early. Thank you for your time and your attention. This is recorded and will be posted on the Twin website. All of our webinars are posted. Pardon me? Oh, I thought I heard someone. All of our webinars are posted so that you can archive them, use them in your professional development with your teachers, faculty meetings. So they're a great resource for you. So this will be up there later and able for you, or available for you to use. Okay. Thank you everybody for your attention and your time. I appreciate it. Have a great evening.